Hello and welcome to this Finance for the Future session on driving change in the finance community. Today, we'll be looking at how education and innovation can reshape the future of finance. My name is Helen Slinger, and I'm the Executive Director at the Prince's Accounting for Sustainability project, which is 1/3 of the partnership behind the Finance for the Future Awards. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by a fascinating group of speakers. First up, we have one of our awards judges, Richard Barker, Professor of Accounting and Associate Dean of Faculty at Saïd Business School at the University of Oxford. Richard is an expert in financial reporting and the academic member of the Corporate Reporting Council, which sets UK accounting standards. Richard also serves on the Financial Reporting Advisory Board and is on the A4S expert panel. Welcome, Richard. Next up, we have Dr. Mirabelle Muûls, who is a previous winner of the Driving Change category at the Finance for the Future Awards. Mirabelle is an assistant professor in economics at Imperial College Business School and was until recently a lecturer at the Grantham Institute at Imperial. Mirabelle is the program director for the business school's Masters in Climate Change, Management and Finance. She is also a research associate in the Centre for Economic Performance at the London School of Economics. Welcome, Mirabelle. And finally, we have Veronica Poole, partner and global IFRS and corporate reporting leader at Deloitte. Her current priorities include influencing and driving change in the accounting and corporate reporting space and in the accounting profession, including reporting of ESG and climate-related financial and business risks. Welcome, Veronica. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. So before we get started, I wanted to share just a little bit of background. The Finance for the Future Awards were created in 2012 to recognise leadership within finance to drive sustainable economies. We are looking for examples of good financial practice that could be transformational in building sustainable organisations. The awards also highlight the role that the finance function plays in innovation and integrated thinking. This year, we wanted to give you a snapshot of some of the marvellous work being done across the finance community to remain resilient in the face of current challenges and ensure a green and sustainable recovery. Living and working through one of the biggest crises of this century so far, we have been encouraged to see the ongoing innovation and drive for change demonstrated by the finance community across the globe. When issues such as climate change, nature loss, and social inclusion could easily have fallen off the agenda, we have instead seen in many places a redoubling of efforts. So today we'll be focusing on our driving change in the finance community category of the awards, and we'll also be discussing the important role continuing innovation plays in bringing about this change. The Driving Change Award recognises the contribution of individuals, organisations, or sometimes joint entrants in driving action to integrate sustainability through education, training and academia. The awards are organised as a partnership between A4S, Deloitte and ICAW, with each of us playing our own role in driving change through education. ICAW, of course, as a professional training body, Deloitte through training graduates to be practicing accountants, and A4S through the delivery of the Accounting for Sustainability Academy for senior finance professionals. So we are indeed very lucky today to be able to discuss some of these important questions with our esteemed panel. So Richard, I'll come to you first. It'd be good to get your viewpoint. What is the current state of sustainable finance education?
Well, I think probably the best way to describe it is evolving, right? So what there has been in recent years is a huge expansion of thinking about this, about different sources that you can go to for relevant information. So, you know, the literature, and in particular practitioner literature, I would say, but both practitioner and research literature has grown considerably. It's always been there, but it's much more mainstream now than it was. And so I think that, you know, there's a lot happening, but at the same time, what there isn't yet is a fusion of all of that. So, you know, we still largely have financial accounting and finance taught as they've always been taught, and we have sustainability as a massively growing area, of which sustainability reporting, sustainability relating to finance is one component. What we have relatively little of is bringing together those two worlds into its own space, and that's true both of in my view, both of theory and of practice, in particular theory, actually. So there's no shortage of examples and illustrations out there. What there isn't as yet is as it were, a common body of knowledge. So to teach any discipline, you need to have the textbook, as it were, and the textbook in this space doesn't yet exist, in my view. And so I think what you're seeing is an increasing number of programs, of aspects of education coming through, but they are sort of specialist master's programs or elective courses on programs. They're not yet core elements of teaching. I think what Mirabelle does is the reason for winning the prize last year is a really good example of this. So what you have in that program, I'm going to talk you up Mirabelle a little bit now, but what you have in, hopefully won't steal your speech, but what you have in there is it's not a finance course and it's not a sustainability course. It's explicitly designed to bring those two together. So it's in the overlap. And that's really quite rare at the present. But we're getting there, I think.
Thank you. So Mirabelle, Richard's giving a little bit of a sneak preview there, and we'll be coming on to talk about your course shortly. But in what ways can the academic and educational communities play a transformative role in building a sustainable economy?
That's a good question. So I think why is education important here is that first, if we think about younger students, just in university, either undergraduate or master students, they are actually going to be the future workforce. They're going to be the future leaders. They're going to be future investors and consumers. And therefore, if they are given the tools to understand all these interactions that Richard was mentioning, then other actors will have to follow, people who hire them, people who invest for them, etc. Then if we think a bit higher up at executive education, there practitioners need the tools to understand what is working, and these tools are not that easy to grasp. So education is needed to be constructed in a way that's applicable for them, but that gives them the combination of science, finance, and business knowledge in the way that they can then apply in their jobs and in their careers. And then again, I think there's also a role for research and academia to collaborate with industry to bridge this academic and business world in answering the questions that the investment community is asking today, and to do so in an impartial, data evidence driven way. So in these three areas, early education, executive education, and research, I think there's really a role to help the transformation, to help the path towards a sustainable society.
Great. And we do accept entries for the Driving Change in the Finance Community Award from all three of those areas. So thank you for putting them so clearly. Veronica, we've all heard the term skills shortage thrown around. So in your opinion, from your perspective at Deloitte, what is the true scale of the problem?
Well, I think the issue is that we actually have a challenge across the entire ecosystem, across the entire financial community. We've been discussing around different topics during this summit, that our world and our business are changing rapidly in the face of climate change, the current pandemic, and our desire and the need to drive harder to achieve the sustainable development. So, but the skills and knowledge that are needed to respond to this challenge are changing. And what we are looking at is pretty much an interesting, if you wish, transformation, where we need to transform our finance professional from what they used to be, the traditional CFO, to what has been named as the Chief Value Officer, CVO. And Professor Mervyn King had put that assertion in his book, Chief Value Officer, Accountants Can Save the Planet. But of course, equipping the professional to become a CVO requires a completely different set of skills, really. Because what you need to be going to is to the core of the integrated thinking, and how do you equip someone to be able to exercise day to day? So, and you would need to start looking at things like, how do you focus on purpose and active governance over those broader factors? How do you make sure that people understand what the sustainable development goals are all about? And what are the right standards of ethics, business ethics, that need to be accompanying all of that thinking? Because fundamentally what we need to be going to is to equip the professional to understand that that license to operate that was previously taken for granted can no longer be taken for granted. And that the expectation that business plays its role in the society is a real expectation. And with that comes the need to have a better understanding of stewardship and fiduciary duties to broader stakeholders. We need to have a stronger focus on strategy. And so your classic accountant now needs to be, if you wish, understanding how to manage your thinking around strategy and embedding sustainability into your strategic direction, your everyday decision making. And that in turn requires understanding not only of the business model, but of the entire value chain that that business operates in. All those new risks and opportunities like climate change or cyber. And we would need to understand that sort of core concept of impacts and dependencies and the circularity that exists. And we would need to understand much broader data that we need to manage that goes with it. And it's easier said than done sometimes, because once we start talking about data, we really need to be starting to think about the controls, accountability, assurance around data that goes way beyond the financial factors. And then fundamentally, that needs to be wired in. It needs to be part of the DNA of the way the finance professional is thinking about the business. And it would be very interesting, you know, when you're starting about the academic conversation here with how we train our people. But we also need to think about backfilling, because the challenge is not really just about how do you train and upskill people to enter the business, but how do you backfill for those finance professionals that are already in business. And that's where the board education programs, on-the-job training, continuous professional education, appropriate standards and guidance, all of that starts coming in. And I think all of those ingredients are very important. They all need to be in place. So if you just say standards and guidance, you know, at this point in time, we don't have the universally accepted sustainability standards, which are treated the same way as financial reporting standards. And of course, if we were to get that, that would act as an accelerator, because ultimately necessity will drive the progress. And I think that is going to facilitate that development in the system. So the challenge is actually multifold. It's education at every level and other bits of ecosystem that need to move together.
Great, thank you. And you referenced Professor Mervyn King there. I believe Professor King was planning to join this session, so maybe we'll get some challenging questions from him in the Q&A later. So Mirabelle, can you tell us a little bit about your work in this space, which won you the Finance for the Future Award?
Yes, of course. So the name of our entry for the award, we called it Climate Change and Finance at Imperial College Business School. And the reason the title is a bit broad is because in the past 5 years, we've developed under various strands a lot of activity around climate change and finance. So it started with the launch of a new master's program called Climate Change Management and Finance. And this was done as a collaboration of the Grantham Institute at Imperial and the Business School. And we were really lucky, and we were keen to build on this unique position of, or a great position, maybe hopefully not unique, of having a university that does research in engineering, in climate science, in data at the frontier, but also a business school that has very strong finance faculty and the experience to teach business degrees. So we brought these capabilities together to create a specialized master's that grew very fast in success. So we knew we had the people to teach the students. We quite quickly knew that businesses were interested in such students, and we didn't know whether students would be interested. And then when we launched, it was really exciting because students from all around the world started applying. Numbers keep growing, and it creates a really vibrant cohort of students who all have this common goal of, they want change to happen, and they want this change to be part of that change through their careers. And so we get a great variety of students who also have themselves brought extracurricular innovation. So they've created a podcast called Green Minds. I really encourage you to listen to it. It's great. They've created a competition for climate finance innovation. So it's a great feeling as an educator, because when what you create encourages students to create their own initiatives. So that has been a great experience to be part of. Then from that success, we built on professional education. So we have a suite of executive MBAs, where we've been able to slowly but surely include more sustainability training and climate finance training into those programs. And we created a MOOC that has been used by professionals to train. And then we have weekly seminars, events, talks that sort of build on the different links that are made between organizations, businesses, the students, the more professional students, etc. And then as a third strand, we created a center called the Center for Climate Finance and Investment that works together, as I said before, for creating research that's applicable to the industry, working with the UN, working with different firms in the city, doing workshops, creating reports, and really fostering research in those areas. So these three together, climate change and finance, has become really a very vibrant area at Imperial.
So there was quite a breadth of activity that went into your entry, which is good to hear. So Richard, what was it about this entry that you and your fellow judges were impressed by? And in general, what is it that you're looking for in this category?
So what was particularly impressive is the overlap that I described, and that's manifest in the career trajectories of the people Mirabelle has just described, where people go. So it wasn't just a finance faculty course with a bit of sustainability thrown in, and it wasn't a climate science course with a sort of go figure what you're supposed to do with it kind of thing. It was explicitly about the link between the two, and in fact, the two sort of individual winners of the award come from quite different backgrounds in that sense. But there's the industry experience and the academic perspective as well. So it's a course where the core design principle is around the fusion between sustainability and finance. That's what's really distinctive about it, I think. And it's not surprising when you get that right, when you hit that sweet spot, that the sort of things that Mirabelle is describing start to happen, that there is an appetite for that. And you get good students together and they will do good things in that space. So it's really encouraging to see that. I think it's generally is true that there's, in all settings, I think there's a latent demand to be engaged in this space, and there's an institutional structural need to provide the channels to allow that engagement, right? So it's very common in any form of employment to have people who would like their day job to be more about sustainability, and it's our job to make that possible, I think. So that's what's distinctive. So
any tips, Richard, for those who are looking to enter this category? They want to make sure that they cover off.
Have a phone call with Mirabelle and give you a few tips. I think another thing that's striking actually is that there's a degree of innovation going on here, right? So as Mirabelle described, it's growing, right? Because it's in the right space. But taking the risk to be in the right space in the first place is quite a bold thing to do, and especially when you're bringing together subsets of people who don't normally work together. That's it's not straightforward, and so there's quite a bit of institutional work to be done, as it were, to get the thing off the ground. So I think there's a degree of innovation that I think is good, but it's recognizing that making progress on sustainability is an interdisciplinary exercise, and bringing that together in a coherent way is the trick, I think.
Great.
Edinburgh is good at this as well, by the way, but there aren't many degree programs that are explicitly set up in that way. Very few.
Hopefully that will change in the near term. Thank you, Richard. So, Veronica, have you seen any other examples of driving change through education, training, and academia? And Richard referenced one or two.
Well, indeed, and I think Richard also referenced innovation. I mean, there is a lot of innovations that we have seen as the judges of the Finance of the Future Awards. And in addition to the excellent examples we just had about, I would cite the Center for Social and Environmental Accounting Research. They were highly commended last year. And the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change in the Environment won in 2018 for the tools that they developed, which is central to the Transition Pathway Initiative and allows investors to make climate competent decisions. So we do see some amazing examples of innovations through the awards. But there is one further initiative that I really wanted to flag as innovative and is extremely critical. And that's an education initiative that is targeting that backfilling of the knowledge and the education for those already in finance. It's with Chapter 0, the Directors Climate Forum. And they're very much focused on the climate skills in the boardroom. And how do you create a program to equip the community of the existing non-executive and executive directors with the right knowledge, skills, tools, resources to enable them to encourage that informed debate in the boardroom so that they don't shy away from the difficult questions and that they actually try to understand the impact of climate change and how it is factored into the business decision-making at each company. So Chapter 0 have created an amazing source of resources. But what's really quite interesting to me, what they have absolutely came across as an interesting point of discovery, if you wish, is that uneven level of knowledge amongst board directors is a huge challenge. And that a single board member just talking about climate change does not really gather the right amount of momentum in the boardroom as rapidly as you would like it to. And that all board members need to have that basic level of knowledge in order to feel comfortable to engage in the conversation. So the whole board needs to be brought along the journey. So I would certainly commend that. And also in that same vein, of the existing professional who is already in business education. So Deloitte joined forces with the ICAW to develop a series of resources, including some education videos and interviews that target what does climate change mean for a business and the role of the finance professionals in that regard. These videos are freely available, and I think it would be amiss of me not to recommend them to the broader audience. And there are many excellent initiatives, but perhaps again it would be totally amiss of me not to mention the great work of the A4S. The director's guides that A4S produces are excellent education tools, and they really produce to help directors to apply that integrated thinking in practice, that practical piece that Richard was talking about at the beginning.
Thank you, Veronica, and thank you for mentioning our guides. And indeed, I believe we are hearing later today from Julie Badley from Chapter 0 on one of our sessions. So if anyone listening is interested, you can find access to that on the event platform. So Mirabelle, we've heard a few examples of different things that are going on in the academic space and the education space, but it feels like there's different pockets rather than it actually being mainstream just yet. So what is it from a system-wide perspective that's needed? What further change is required?
So I think what we've mentioned it a bit already is it's not enough for sustainability to just be one elective or one introduction at the start of the year. It really needs to, we need the sustainability to be ingrained in the whole of education. And actually, I think we see it more already in primary and secondary schools education, where children are being from very young made more sensitive to the issues. And it's something that seems to be lost a bit further on in higher education. And it's not that difficult, but the system is such that, and as Richard said, we work with big institutions that have a lot of moving parts. And so what needs to change is that thinking of sustainability has to come in the whole design of programs, in different modules, in electives, in the way we engage with professionals, careers advice. So as an example, we in our careers advice team, which is very active, as a business school, you always get good careers advice. It used to be that there was one person who vaguely knew about what careers can I have if I want them to be in sustainability. Having our new masters then brought a lot of students who are like, no, we need more than one person who doesn't know much. And so that has had to change. And now actually the careers team have a team on those questions who also advise other students. And so, but that change being only incremental is not enough. I think it can be a bottom up, but it also we need the leaders of academic institutions, professional bodies and the work you're doing actually is really great in that sense, because it brings to the front of the mind what has to change. And it's a complex change, and it reflects the complexity of the change the whole of society has to go through in terms of all the choices we make as individuals, as businesses. The change in education has to happen, and it has to happen more than by isolated programs. And when we started the program, actually, our advisory board immediately flagged that and said, it's not enough for Imperial to have a few masters on this. It has to be throughout all your degrees that these issues are being put at the center. So I think that if that change happens to the education system and more widely to the links it has with the rest of the economy and society, then I think it will it will accelerate very fast. I'm quite optimistic about that.
Great, thank you. So it's about having the right learning at the right stages of everybody's career, no matter where they are, from primary school right through to being on the board. Thank you. And so, Richard, what do you think stands in the way of greater change? Because obviously we are where we are. We haven't been able to change it significantly to this point. What challenges do we need to solve?
So just listening to Veronica and Mirabelle, one thing I think is really important, just as a practical matter in education, is certification. So if people feel the need to be certified, they'll feel the need to be educated, right? And so there is a role for, just as there is in financial accounting, there is a role for, as it were, a social recognition of this is something you need to know. When students take a course, a course within a program, they kind of trust the instructor of that course to teach what it is that needs to be taught, right? And they will judge how well they've done by the standards of whatever happens to have been selected to be taught. So we've got to get to a stage where sustainability reporting, sustainable finance, however you want to label it, becomes something that is recognizably something people feel they need to know. And that accelerates the process of change. And I think certification is critical. And so Veronica mentioned standardization. If you were to have mandatory global standards for sustainability reporting, you would have a massive boom in education, because all of a sudden there would be a recognized need. Okay, I need to know this, right? And so you get the professional firms, the professional bodies, educators and so on developing material, and as it develops, so it starts to snowball. So I think that sort of there's a sort of social recognition of the need to be qualified that's absolutely core, actually.
Great, thank you. And Veronica, we've had some of Richard's thoughts there. You know, from your perspective, what sort of initiatives would plug the gap that we currently see?
Well, I would very much echo some of Mirabelle's comments. It needs to be about this integration, if you wish, in the way we think about sustainability. It needs to be as embedded as in the core curriculum, in everything we do, you know, whether that's part of the accountancy qualifications or it's part of our professional development and training, it's part of MBAs, like the debits and credits for financial numbers are. So if you look, actually, the challenge, though, is a very interesting one. So if you look just at FTSE 100, and I appreciate the UK market is not necessarily representative of every country, but 20% of FTSE 100 CEOs are accountancy qualified. Only 20%. Another 25 are MBAs. So how do you get that broader coverage? And unless it is fully integrated in the way we think about business, I think we will not be reaching those remaining 55%. So I think then there is that backfilling I was talking about earlier. And in order to do the backfilling, we need a collection of measures. We can't just do it as a, you know, I'll just run somebody, you know, through another MBA course or through yet another qualification or whatnot. Can't just send everyone back to school. So for those in a professional practice, for those in business, it's about the access to continuing professional education. And, you know, for accounting firms like ours, you know, I think that education then, I guess, should be filtering into the way our people advise to the clients, the questions they ask, the way we start then promulgate that thinking in the business. For those in business, I think we just need to remember that, you know, there is lots of good programs in place, and we just need to make sure that those education programs fully embed the thinking around sustainability, around the integrated thinking, about the climate, about all of those things that are becoming quite business critical. Because fundamentally, we need people to not just understand this is business critical, but they also need to understand at a bit more of a granular level, the so what. What do I do about this? You know, what does that really mean to the way I think about my own business day in, day out? And then, of course, then there is that question of how do I work around this new set of data? So if I have got this whole lot of new data to think about, I need to be data confident. And what skills do we need in order to be able to handle that data? Because it goes beyond technology. It goes to the, how do I get the right rigor of controls in place? How do I understand that data? How do I assure that data? And the big challenge for accountants now will be getting to grips with the assurance around that non-financial data, because frankly, you know, that move from just review for consistency with my understanding of the business as I obtain it in the course of my audit to the full assurance is not a small move. It's a significant move. And as Richard was saying towards the end, you know, global standards, the need for assurance, these are very big levers. So if we can actually use those levers appropriately, that creates the need and the drive in the system to get people up to speed with all of that. And that's how the integration starts happening. So it's the whole ecosystem move that needs to happen, and education is a critical part of it.
Absolutely. And integration is a critical part of it as well. Great. So, I mean, we're going to be going to the audience for some questions, and good to see some of those are coming in. But just one more question before we do that. So, Mirabelle, you know, having heard everything from the panel today and heard a little bit about your entry, you know, what tips would you give to those who are thinking of entering? You know, what have you got out of the process?
I would say be innovative. You know, education has lots of innovation going on in terms of even thinking how we learn, what we learn. So I think there's loads of opportunities to think about how that can be combined with sustainability education. And then also what I learned is trying to, it was a really interesting process to think back you're always busy doing things, and actually it was great to be able to pause and think, okay, what did we do right, what did we do wrong and could have done better? And so I would really try and do that when preparing an entry, was just think positive and take the time to think.
Great, thank you. And we're of course very glad that you entered. So as I say, we're going to start answering questions from the audience, but first we are going to play you a short video about the Finance for the Future Awards, just to give you a little bit of time to send those questions in. Thank you. So I have a few questions here. Now, of course, the ICAEW is the third partner in our partnership for Finance for the Future Awards, Veronica. And there's a question here about professional bodies and what role can professional bodies play in tackling the skills gap?
Well, a huge role, absolutely. Because as we say, I mean, a huge number of professionals are accounting qualified. And so those professional bodies have got access to a huge number of people who are in business critical roles already, or are training the new generation of professionals. And I think absolutely integrating sustainability into the core curriculum, not as a separate subject, but as core of each and every application, whether that pertains to the recognition, measurement, disclosure of intangibles, for example, which form such a significant part of a modern business, or whether we're looking at some of the business courses or talking about carbon taxes as part of taxation, and so on and so on. It is really bringing it into the DNA, as I was saying earlier, bringing it in a way that people think about sustainability, the metrics, the issues, the new risks, the new opportunities, exactly the same way as they think about financial capital, financial risks, financial opportunity. And therefore, it is absolutely critical that those organizations really play their role, particularly at this point in time, where there is that specific need in the system to equip the professionals already in business and start training the new generation. I'm watching this day in, day out as our own professionals are looking to go back to do their MBA degrees in order to get some education in sustainability. That has become obviously one of the key exciting opportunities for people to go and get their qualifications in climate or sustainability more broadly. But the question then becomes, but why? This is part of what you should be doing already and having an opportunity and access to through your normal professional qualifications and route. That materials, that challenge should be already provided on the job and by those professional organizations through the continuous professional trainings that we all have to go through to continue to be qualified accountants. So I think that just needs to be fully integrated.
Great, thank you. And there's a question here for you, Mirabelle. You talked earlier about the careers advisors and what it is that students go on to do after they've done their masters. So I guess the question here is, have you got a sense about how the employability of your students has been impacted by them having this much more integrated course rather than perhaps one of the more traditional finance courses?
Yes, it's a good question, because when we launched the program, there was a feeling from some colleagues that these students would get a great training. It's not cheap, so would invest a whole year, but actually would not get much out of it in terms of their salary or their careers. It's hard for me to judge on salaries, but what I know is that 95% or more of our graduates have actually a job 3 months after graduating, where it's already a good start. But also, more importantly, I'm in touch with all of our alumni, because we're keen to keep links between our alumni and current students. And nearly all of them work in sustainability, in climate finance, in energy companies, in disruptive startups. So in areas where they are applying, and they tell us, thank God you gave us this horrible programming data science course where I struggled so much, because I'm actually using it in my job. So I think, finding it does help them also find what they want to work in, because before starting a course, they find it a bit abstract. I'm going to work in sustainability, and they don't, and climate change, but they don't know what type of careers they can have in there. And thanks to all the people, like you, who come and talk to them and tell them about what they do in their jobs, it really inspires them to aim for those companies, to apply to those jobs, to talk to our alumni who are having careers in those areas. So that's how I would describe it.
Great, thank you. And from careers advice to maybe academic advice, we've got a question here from an accounting and finance student who says, I'm currently preparing my dissertation about sustainability. So good on you, first of all. But what do you advise a student who wants to approach this topic, considering what tools are available and that are not developed enough at the moment? So maybe, Richard, maybe we can start with you and maybe come to the others after.
That's quite a broad question. Yeah, I could do with a bit more of a steer on that, but I think, for a student dissertation, it's tempting to sort of think of that as being your life's work, and it's not. So don't overstress it, would be one thing to say. Focus on something which don't do what you feel you ought to do, in some sense. Focus on something that strikes you as an interesting puzzle or problem in this space, because it probably genuinely is a problem or a puzzle. And so get into it and start to make sense of it, and you'll find the relevant materials. There's no shortage of materials out there. So find something that doesn't make sense. I think
something that doesn't make sense. Okay, great. I mean, I did my own dissertation on CapEx and incorporating social and environmental factors into capital investment decision making. So that was something that I felt was.
Well, that's an example of something that doesn't. Yeah. So people, it's very common to hear people talk about integrating sustainability metrics into financial performance. It's like, well, hang on, what do you actually mean by that? So it's clearly not integrating into financial statements, because they'll already be there. And it's not. You don't just take a water usage number and plug it into a valuation model, right? So what does that actually mean? So for example, you might go from, okay, well, a company has a certain carbon footprint, it has a certain carbon target, that implies a carbon budget, that implies a transition path, that implies CapEx associated with making the transition, that implies a cost. I got it now, right? Do you see what I mean? So actually exploring something which on the face of it, people say a lot, but they haven't thought about it enough to know what it means. So that's a really good example.
Great, thank you. Mirabelle, I don't know, from your teaching perspective, you have a view?
Yeah, I think I second what Richard said. I think maybe it can be also interesting to look at case studies, a few. So it's often hard to give examples of things that have worked. there are some rankings or initiatives that have had an impact. And so as a student dissertation, it can be interesting to look more carefully at a group of companies or at a sector where change has happened, and that can serve as an example or an illustration of things that happen. It depends really on the student. Also, if you want to go more into data, there's so much data online that you can learn to use, Twitter data, climate data, etc., and trying to use that data. Or, interviewing people can also be very interesting to get opinions from different spheres of the industry and of experts, and trying to pull them together and give new insights about things.
Great, thank you. And there's a question here, Veronica, which is from an existing professional. So asking, how do I get my CFO to understand the business case for investing in my upskilling? And I guess I just wondered whether there's anything you've seen maybe at your clients that might help to answer that question, or from anywhere else.
Well, I think like with every business decision for the CFO, they need to understand the business case for that education. And for that, you need the granularity that explains why this is going to be a risk if that education is not received, why it is an opportunity if the education is received, and what is therefore the right actions and how they are going to assist in the day-to-day decisions. So you can't just take it and I would like to go in a sustainability course or get a degree. The why becomes extremely important. The why in the context of your specific business as to how that is going to make a difference becomes extremely important. I think that goes to any investment decision, and that's another form of capex, if you wish. It's investment in the professional, in the business. Why would there be a suitable return on that investment? I think you need to take it from there. I think if the CFO totally gets how this impacts the business, I think they will more readily buy into the conversation as to why they want to invest in you. But that goes to any decision around sustainability, frankly. It goes to the core of understanding at a granular enough level why this makes sense. I think being able to explain why that makes sense is extremely important. And in terms of do people make these decisions today? Yes, they do. There is a lot of investment into the new skill. There is a lot of investment into trying to rethink how to integrate some of that thinking into the core business finance function, to sort of break through the silo mentality and bring the two together. And that requires investment in knowledge and education by those professionals in the job, both on the finance side and on sustainability side, to find the common language, to understand why the two need to speak to each other and why that connectivity really matters.
Great, thank you. And Richard, I think the reason that we are where we are today is perhaps because there are some challenges for people sitting in your shoes, for those who are doing research and those who are lecturing in finance and accounting. What is it that are the barriers at the moment for those individuals to be able to incorporate this into their research and into their syllabi, and how can we overcome some of those challenges?
I think there are really big structural obstacles there. So in both research and in teaching, what has gone before is a good anchor for being successful in what happens next, right? So if you want to publish in a top finance journal, then you're better off publishing the same kind of stuff that people have already published in top finance journals. So if you steer too far away, people won't recognize it, and so that's problematic. Similarly, in teaching, if you're a serious researcher, then teaching is not what you do. It's just something you're required to do, and so most faculty who are good researchers who also teach will just talk what's worked before. They'll talk what they were taught. They'll talk the cases that they know work, and they won't sort of pivot dramatically to start teaching something else. There's too much of a cost and too much of a risk in doing that. So those structural issues are really fundamental, actually. I think the way you get over it over time is through making appointments. So this is similar to the business case question that was just asked. Actually, it's that it's the business case for doing something, something like Mirabelle's program, actually. And increasingly there is a demand for. I think increasingly sustainability is being recognised as a space that's a sort of hot demand for executive education in particular, and that's great because that means you can make a business case for it, and then you start to hire people, and then things start to change. But there's a lot of inertia in academia, I think, unfortunately.
Great, thank you. And I think getting over those barriers, I think, is really important. Getting over them in as speedy way as we can, I think, is very, very helpful. So Mirabelle, when we spoke before this interview, and I was asking you about the course and a lot of the activity that you have, and you mentioned about how important it is that people follow your leadership. My words, not yours, but how important it is that they do similar things. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about that and give us a sense of what you would hope to see.
Actually, when we launched the program, we were asked by the institution to tell us, how new would it be? Are we filling a space? So we thought at the time we were, but really our hope is, the good thing of academics is they work for an institution where the business case is more remote from the actual academics. And so for us, it was really the case that we wanted more institutions to follow. Oxford and Cambridge are putting up similar programs, but others, Edinburgh already early on had a program quite close to ours. But now what we want to see, we get so many applications, we can't educate everyone in this space, so we definitely need others to step in. We're trying to launch partnerships in Asia to also have universities there launching degrees or creating executive education programs in that area. But it needs to happen everywhere, and as you said, at different layers of education. So we're not worried about having more people doing the same. We actually hope they do, and that we can create discussions and for example, this competition the students have created and that we're helping them with. The more students are trained, the more the competition becomes creative and innovative and interesting. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And a final question to each of you. Maybe Veronica, I'll come to you first. For anybody who's been listening to this session and feels inspired to go away and to do something differently and something to sort of change the status quo, what would be either your tip or your ask of them?
I think my first question in all of these cases will go to the core, I guess, of what I would describe as integrated thinking around your organization or your own career, your own educational prospects, which is if you're first embarking on the journey, think about the challenge that the business will have to face in view of all the new risks, of the need for us to drive the sustainable development. What is it that the business, in your view, will need to do in order to get that right? And if so, what skills do you think will be absolutely critical? Then go and find a degree that gives you that, give you the right skills for life. If you're already in business, and if you're really looking for that business case, if you wish, ask yourself a question. Here are the new risks. Here are the new opportunities. Why are we still thinking about this in silos? Why is that not happening in my daily life? And if it isn't, then start shaking the ground. The time is to start shaking that ground.
Great, thank you. And Richard, Mirabelle, maybe you could give a perspective from academia. What is it that other academics maybe who are listening could what would be your tip to them, or what could they maybe go away and do? Maybe Richard, will come to you first.
Yeah, sure. So a very similar message to Veronica, actually, interestingly. So I think that most organizations were not originally designed to be sustainable, right? They were designed to do whatever they were designed to do. So organizational functions and roles and committees and all the rest of it were not explicitly set up for this to be anybody's responsibility. And that's just as true in the university environment as it is anywhere else. Universities are also organizations, right? And so the challenge, I think more than anything else, is to start the conversation. And because what has to change is organizational structures. People have to own stuff. Things have to be resourced in order, this business case question, in order for sustainability to be taken seriously. So for, in a business school environment, the issues are not just what do we teach, but it's also, are we sustainable in our own operations? Do we get it? Are we credible in the way that we teach? Are we able to procure for executive education contracts where sustainability matters as part of the tender criteria, and so on? Do we engage in sustainability in the outside world, in impact, and so on? So I think it's because the organisation will carry on doing what it's doing unless someone says, "Hang on, we need to do something about this," and because that person could be anybody inside the organisation, right? I think the need is well, I was going to say shake the tree. If Veronica had the ground shaking, I'll shake the tree, or shake both. So
fantastic, thank you. Mirabelle, anything to add?
Very similar, just saying, you can carry on doing what you've been doing for the past months and years, but actually it makes it really exciting in a job when you start thinking about new things and thinking about how to integrate sustainability in your research, in your teaching, in the programs, in your institution. At least me, it has led me to meet really interesting people, the students, my colleagues, and to create something, new that makes me want to see more. And I think we all need some excitement after the crisis we've gone through. And I think bringing change on the climate and sustainability front can be a great way to move forward.
Great. Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for in terms of questions, but thank you to all of you for your insightful and inspiring responses. Before we close this session, though, it feels fitting to recognise and pay tribute to our friend and colleague, the late Professor Jeffrey Uneman. He was a valued member of the A4S expert panel and of ICAW's Research Advisory Board. He contributed so much to the field of sustainability accounting over the years, and he would have been delighted to have been here today to see so many people engage with this session. We're just so very sad that he wasn't with us long enough to do so. However, I am excited to announce that in his honour, the Finance for the Future Awards will be renaming the award we've been focusing on today, and will now play proud host to the Jeffrey Uneman Award for Driving Change in the Finance Community. Thank you again to all our panellists for sharing their time and insight, and thank you everyone for watching. I hope you've been inspired. And for those for whom this has been an introduction, I'd say that there's never been a better time to start to bring about change, to start the conversation within your organisation about what you could be doing, and to take a look at some of the further resources we have posted on the A4S Summit event platform. If you are one of those who is further ahead on this journey, we want to hear from you as soon as entries open. Sign up now to be kept informed. We'd love to hear your story. And again, a link to the Finance for the Future website is on the A4S Summit event platform. So to you all, I'd recommend for further inspiration, you access our library of case studies displaying best practice across a range of sustainable disciplines. And thanks again to all our panellists. Thanks to everyone, and we'll see you again soon.